So the reading this morning can be found in Luke chapter 1. That can be found on page 1025 of the Church Bibles. So Luke chapter 1, starting at verse 5. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless, because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty, and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of the incense came, all the assembled worshippers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. And he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man and my wife is well on in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favour and taken away my disgrace among the people."
Father, we thank you so much for your words to us. Please give us ears to hear, to accept your words, and to bear much fruit. And we ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, as David mentioned earlier, and I guess it probably hasn't escaped your notice, and we have now entered December. It's cold. Christmas lights are going up on houses, and the TV is full of Christmas adverts. Christmas is coming. And I wonder how that makes us feel. A whole world of emotions, I imagine. Perhaps excited, and you are already 3 chocolates into your Advent calendar. And perhaps busy. December is basically one mad dash for you. It's a busy time of year at work anyway, and then there's everything else on top of it. And perhaps you're feeling unprepared, especially when you talk to the person sitting next to you and they bought all their gifts in September. Perhaps, though, the thought of Christmas brings feelings of sadness as you remember what Christmases used to be like, or think about who might be missing. Perhaps feelings of dread. You don't look forward to it, and the fact everyone else does makes it worse. Maybe you feel a whole mix, a mashup of all of those things. I wonder, though, whether anyone's first thought was confident. And Christmas makes me feel confident. Well, it is my hope and prayer that even amongst all those other feelings, Christmas this year would leave us feeling confident. As Sunday by Sunday, we look at the first Christmas as recorded for us in Luke's Gospel, because as we saw last Sunday, Luke wrote his Gospel so that we might have certainty. And that includes these first two chapters where Luke recounts the Christmas story. Luke wants us to be confident about Christmas. Confident, firstly, that it happened, but confident, secondly, what it means and why it is such good news. That's the word the angel used, isn't it? Good news. And so between now and the new year, we're going to spend our time with a few gaps, but mostly in Luke's Gospel and these first two chapters which God has given us so that we can have certainty. Certainty that Jesus' birth was a joy-filled, joyous occasion when God himself came. Jesus' birth was a joy-filled occasion when God himself came. And to help us have certainty that that is exactly what happened, that is the great good news of Christmas, Luke does two things. Firstly, he records actual events which motivate confidence. And secondly, he records practical examples which model confidence. Let's delve into our passage and see that that's the case. First thing to notice is that Luke records actual events which motivate confidence. Take a look with me, beginning at verse 5. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless, because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Straight away, we see this isn't a fairy tale, don't we? It doesn't begin once upon a time, it begins in the time. In the time of Herod. This is real history, the sort that you can plot on a timeline. However, at first glance, and for a gospel about Jesus Christ, this is a surprising start. And because Luke doesn't begin his gospel with Jesus, does he? Or with Mary and Joseph, but with a couple called Zechariah and Elizabeth. However, as we'll see, their story is part of the bigger story of Jesus. And what happens to them gives us confidence about in Jesus. Who are Zechariah and Elizabeth, though? Well, firstly, they are priestly people. Zechariah, he's actually a priest. Whilst Elizabeth, she can trace her sort of family tree all the way back to Aaron, the very first high priest. Secondly, they're godly people. Not sinlessly perfect, but like Noah, like Abraham, they are righteous and blameless among their generation. Thirdly, they are suffering people. Childless, because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and now they are in their old age. Real people suffering real heartbreak. Heartbreak which I know will feel very real to some here today. What we have here are actual events which happened in history. But there's more going on, isn't there? These aren't just standard historical events, if I can say that. Because what we have here is a record of God acting in history. Just look at verse 11. Verse 11. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, that's Zechariah, standing at the right side of the altar of incense, that's within the temple. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife, Elizabeth, will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He is never to take wine or fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. Now, the fact that an angel appears and tells Zechariah he's going to have a son is amazing enough. But there are two further reasons for us thinking that something spectacularly significant is going on here, something even more exciting and unusual. And firstly, this birth is following a pattern. Secondly, it's fulfilling a promise. Let's take those one at a time. Firstly, this birth is following a pattern. And what do I mean by that? Well, imagine for a second that you were to turn on the TV and you see someone climbing down some steps. And as they climb down, you hear them saying, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Hang on a minute, you'd think. That sounds familiar. I recognise that. I think this has happened before. Well, in the same way, what we've got here happening at the beginning of Luke's Gospel, it gives us a strong sense of déjà vu. It's following an Old Testament pattern. This has happened before. Read through the Old Testament, the first 3/4 of the Bible, and not once, not twice, but 5 times, you will find stories about women who are unable to conceive. First, there's Sarah, the wife of Abraham. What's striking about their story is how old they are. And just like Zechariah and Elizabeth, Abraham and Sarah are both very old, and yet God gives them a son, Isaac, who fulfills his promises. Next, there's Rebekah, wife of Isaac. We're only 1 generation later, and again, God gives her a son who fulfills his promises, and that son is Jacob. And then we have Rachel, and she's actually Jacob's wife. And again, God gives her a son, Joseph, of Technicolor Dreamcoat fame, who saves his people. Skip a few books on, we get to the book of Judges. And there's a man named Manoah and his wife. Well, guess what? An angel appears to her and promises her a son, Samson, famous for his long hair, immense strength. A son who saves God's people. And what's more, we learn about Samson that he will be filled with the Spirit and must never drink wine or fermented drink. Sound familiar? Finally, you jump on a little bit more to the book of 1 Samuel and you find Hannah. Hannah. She visits the temple. And in the temple, she's promised a son, Samuel. A son who will be a prophet who will prepare the way for God's king. 5 times in the Old Testament, we find stories of miraculous births. And each time a son is born who plays a significant role in the Bible story. These sons, they're not minor bit characters of the Old Testament. They are major players who save God's people, fulfill God's promises, prepare for a king. Here's the point. Miraculous births mark momentous moments. Miraculous births mark momentous moments. When a miraculous birth happens, you can know for sure that God is about to do something spectacular through a significant son, fulfill his promises, save his people, prepare for a king. And so when we begin Luke's Gospel and we read about this birth, we get excited. Something spectacular is about to happen through a significant son. This birth is following a pattern. That's not all, though, because as well as following a pattern, it's also fulfilling a promise. In particular, God, throughout the Old Testament, makes lots of promises. Here's one he makes in Malachi. And Malachi, a prophet about 400 years before Jesus, and his message was about a great day to come, a day called the Day of the Lord. when God himself would come. God would come and visit his people. But before that day, said Malachi, well, God's going to send a messenger, a prophet who will prepare the way. And here is how the book of Malachi ends. It's the very last words of what we have in the Old Testament. They say this: "See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction." End of the Old Testament, 400 years. Now listen to the angel's words. Verse 16 of Luke chapter 1. "He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Did you spot the similarities? And this birth is fulfilling a promise made hundreds of years before Jesus. Elizabeth's significant son, John, he is the prophet who will prepare the way for God himself to come. God, the creator, setting foot in his creation. This birth is fulfilling a promise, meaning what we have here is more than just simply a caring miracle to suffering people, though it absolutely is that. What we have here is the start of something so significant it divides history in two. What we have here is the first bit of evidence in a whole series of evidence that God has come, that Jesus is God himself, the creator, setting foot in his creation, our King, come to fulfill his promises and save his people. That's why Luke starts his gospel here, because he wants us to have certainty, not just that Christmas happened, but what it means. Wants us to be confident that Christmas is not just a twee little story about people in a stable, but a momentous moment when God himself began something spectacular through a significant son. More than that, a day when God himself came. That's not all this story does, though. And because not only does Luke record actual events which motivate our confidence, he provides practical examples which model confidence. It's an amazing double act. In particular, Luke's chapter 1 contains two models. Two people in focus, Mary and Zechariah. We'll meet Mary in a couple of weeks' time. And as we meet Mary and Zechariah, we're meant to spot the contrast. Spoilers, Mary is a wonderful role model. Mary models faith. She models, displays confidence. Whereas Zechariah, at this point in the story, he's not a great model. He doesn't have faith. He doesn't have confidence. I wonder if you spotted that in verse 18 through to 20. I'll read from verse 18. Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well on in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and will not be able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Did you spot it? You did not believe my words. That is the reason why John is silenced. That is how he responded to this glorious message. Zechariah didn't believe, meaning Zechariah stands in contrast to Mary. Now, I am aware that we haven't reached Mary. I've mentioned her a few times. So let me highlight first some of the similarities. You may recognise these from your knowledge of the Christmas story. And then we'll zoom in on the one big difference. Firstly, here are the similarities. Both are visited by the angel Gabriel. And both are told, do not fear. Seems angels are pretty terrifying people to come and have visit you. Both are given a message about a miraculous birth of a significant son. What's more, the angel Gabriel tells them both what to call their son, and both of them respond to the angel with a question. Those are the similarities. Here is the difference. When Mary hears the angel's message, she asks, how will this be? Whilst Zechariah asks, how will I know? Now, at first glance, you might be thinking, those actually sound reasonably similar questions. How will this be? How will I know? But there is a world of difference between them. Mary asks for explanation. Zechariah asks for evidence. Mary asks, how will it be true? Zechariah doubts whether it will be true. Mary can't comprehend what the angel is saying. Zechariah doesn't believe what the angel is saying. And so Zechariah demands proof, meaning Mary is reassured by the angel, whilst Zechariah is rebuked. Mary rejoices, she sings in praise, whilst Zechariah is silenced. Because he hasn't believed the message, he cannot pass on the message. Why? Well, because Mary believes, but Zechariah does not. Mary has certainty, but Zechariah does not. And so we are being encouraged to follow in Mary's footsteps and not Zechariah's. To believe God's message, that's what confidence that looks like. And to not demand more evidence from him. Not that asking questions is a bad thing. I think we can sometimes think that sort of having questions is the opposite of having faith. That is not true. Mary questions the angel just like Zechariah. In fact, the Bible is full of people asking God good questions. And so I really do hope that there's no one here today who thinks that sort of having questions is a bad thing. It makes you a bad Christian. That being a believer means having a sort of blind faith that doesn't basically ask about anything. That is not what we see here. Because the difference between Mary and Zechariah, it's not that one of them asks a question but the other doesn't. No, the difference is the attitude behind their questions. Mary believes and asks for explanation. Zechariah does not believe, and he demands more evidence. Again, not that evidence is a bad thing. If you were here last week, you'll hopefully remember that Luke's gospel is an accurate account of actual events. It is jam-packed full of evidence. But there comes a point, does there not, when you have enough evidence. When the issue isn't the amount of evidence, but your refusal to believe. Perhaps a relatively trivial illustration will help. Imagine for a second that I were to tell you that in 1999, I won a musical composition competition for a piece of music called Guinea Pig Lament. Now, you may not believe me, but imagine I were to go online and print off, it's still there, the 1999 list of winners from suffolkfestival.org.uk. And I would take you to page number 2 and show you at the bottom, there it is, composition, 7 to 10 years old. There you go, you can sort of work that out. Luke 40, Ipswich. Imagine I was also to get the band up to come and play the tune for you. Don't worry, I'm not going to. There comes a point, does there not, where you have now got enough evidence. And to not believe, well, it's not to do with the amount of evidence you have. Remember here that Zechariah is a priest. He knows his Old Testament, doesn't he? That's part of his job. He knew that not once, not twice, but 5 times in history, God has already intervened and brought about a miraculous birth, including for old Abraham and Sarah, just like him and his wife. What's more, it's not as if he receives this message from a mate down the pub. No, Zechariah receives this message in the temple from the angel Gabriel. The same angel who appears to Daniel in the Old Testament, an angel of such awesome appearance that every person who ever meets Gabriel in the Bible trembles in fear. Do you know his first words pretty much to Mary, Joseph and Zechariah are "do not fear"? Zechariah's problem isn't a lack of evidence or a dodgy messenger, it is a refusal to believe. It may well be that you're here this morning and you are not in the same position as Zechariah. You haven't actually looked into the evidence. If so, can I recommend Sunday by Sunday coming back as we continue to look through Luke's Gospel? It is jam-packed full of the evidence God has given us to tell us about who Jesus is and why that really makes a difference today. And why not read Luke's Gospel for yourself? And we have a number of copies freely available in the entrance hall. That would be a great thing to do over Christmas, wouldn't it? Great New Year's resolution, perhaps. Whatever you do, if you're in that position, please can I urge you to look into the evidence. Not a blind faith. And please can I urge you to ask your questions. I would be very happy to talk about questions. I'm sure there are many in the room who would love to talk through questions with you. However, it might be that if you're honest, you are actually in a similar position to Zechariah. And perhaps you've known Jesus or about Jesus since your childhood. You have the evidence, but so far you have chosen not to believe. If so, can I urge you not to follow in Zechariah's footsteps, not to keep on raising the bar and telling God, you need to give me more evidence, more reason to believe than you already have. What we have here in Luke's Gospel, in the Bible, is more than enough to be confident, to be certain that Jesus' birth was a joy-filled occasion when God himself came. Finally, it might be that at this point you find yourself worried. After all, you find yourself feeling like Zechariah, but you wish you weren't. Well, know this. Firstly, what we have here in Luke's Gospel is not someone sort of suffering with a real internal struggle and debate. He wants to believe, but he just can't find that he can. No, what we have here is a priest in the temple refusing to believe a message direct from the angel Gabriel. What's more, by the time we reach the end of chapter 1, and we will get there, Zechariah, like Mary, is singing God's praises. And as you read his song, it is abundantly clear that he is full of faith. His disbelief is only temporary. God is more than capable of keeping hold of his people and strengthening their faith. Maybe that's the message you need to hear this morning. God is more than capable of keeping his people and strengthening their faith. That is one of the reasons he's given us Luke's Gospel. so that we can be confident not just that Christmas happened, but what it means, that at Christmas God did something spectacular through a significant son. In fact, God came to fulfill all his promises, save all his people, meaning Christmas. Amongst all of those other emotions that we might feel, Christmas can be a joy-filled and confident celebration of when God himself came. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that at Christmas you came to visit us, your people, in the person of Jesus, to fulfill your promises and to save your people. Thank you so much that we can be confident because of the birth of John the Baptist, the prophet who prepared your way. Please, Father, guard us against disbelief like Zechariah's. Keep us from demanding more evidence than we need, more evidence than you, in your kindness, have already given us. Please, Father, give us faith and confidence, rejoicing and joy, like your servant Mary. And we pray all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Our final song picks up on the fact that Jesus' birth wasn't simply an interesting historical event. No, Jesus was born for a reason, to free us, to deliver us, to reign over us. It's a song that remembers that not only did God come once in the person of Jesus 2,000 years ago, but he will come again. And so we sing together, "Come, O long-expected Jesus." Words of Zechariah, once God has reopened his mouth, and he sings in praise, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people and redeemed them. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago, salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all our days. Amen.